Hello everybody, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we'll be taking a look at the 2024 polling averages as of right now, and we'll be comparing them to the polling averages that we had in June of 2020. So today, the date as of right now, or at the time this video is coming out, is June 8th, or June 9th. I'm recording this on June 8th, sorry, but we'll be looking at the polling averages from June 9th, 2020, comparing them to the averages of today. And what you're going to see is that there was a pretty significant shift towards Donald Trump across every state. And right now, the map you're seeing of the polls right now, June 2024, I've already filled out some states. I'll talk about that in a second. Just the states we don't really need, we don't need to talk like North Dakota or Washington. And then you'll compare them to the polls in these same states in 2020. You can already see that there's a bit of a shift towards Trump because some of these lighter red states have gone dark red. Some of these dark blue states have gone light blue. But we'll be looking at the same set of swing states here. And so the one thing I do want to say is that Maine, we have one poll, and it does have Trump winning, with Trump winning the second district by like a lot, and then Biden winning the first district by less. So Maine, that's 2 electoral votes that Trump really isn't going to be leading the polls in by November, but for now, it's what we have. So just keep that in mind, that Maine is not going to look like this once we get more polling in, but because we have one poll, it's kind of skewed. But yeah, we're going to get into it here. We're going to go alphabetical order, look through all the states, look at what they were giving us in 2020, back in June, and compare them to what they're giving us right now. So on June 8th, 2020, or June 9th, because, well, I'm recording this on June 8th, so we'll do June 8th. But on June 8th, 2020, Biden led Arizona by 3.4%. Now, on June 8th, 2024, Trump's up by 4.4%. So that is a shift of nearly 8% towards Donald Trump. So right now, he's winning it, but in 2020 at this time, he was losing it. And so that's not good for Biden. That's just one state we've already looked at. We can already see a pretty significant swing towards Donald Trump. Now, let's go to our next state here, and you'll begin to notice a pattern. Florida. In June of 2020, Biden was actually up. There was a point where Biden was leading by like 7 points. I remember that. I remember those times. But on June 8th, 2020, Biden was up by 3% in Florida. And right now, everyone knows Donald Trump's going to win Florida. But in the poll, he's up by 9. So that's a 12-point swing. So 2020, Biden up by 3. 2024, Trump up by 9. And the polls ended up being right. The polls ended up being very wrong in Florida. Because on Election Day 2020, Biden was up by 2.5, and he lost by 3.4%. So the polls were off by 6% in Florida on Election Day. And that's not a number you want to see because, again, the consensus was that Biden was a narrow favorite to win Florida on Election Day. Maybe he would, if he lost, he'd lose by under a point. If he won it, maybe he'd win it by 1 or 2. Actually, if you watched my channel way back then, I did have Donald Trump winning Florida narrowly on Election Day. I had him up by about a point in Florida. He won by a lot more than that, but I did have Trump. I did get Florida right. But the point I'm making here, aside from the fact that my predictions are always right, and you should always watch me. Just kidding. But the point I'm making here is that these polls were really skewed. And they underestimated Trump by a lot. And if they do that again, he'll win Florida by like 15. Now, is that what's going to happen? I doubt it, but it's just worth saying. So next state is Georgia. And in June of 2020, on Election Day, Biden led Georgia, but in June, Trump was winning. On June 8th, 2020, Trump was up by 0.2, was essentially closing, narrowing up, and then a week later, Biden would take the lead for the first time. But June 8th, Trump ahead in Georgia. Let's compare it to what we're getting on June 8th, 2024. Trump's up by 5 now. So Georgia does have the smallest swing away from Biden. Obviously, all these states have moved towards Trump. Georgia is the smallest by a good amount. It's only about a 5-point swing, less than that, towards Biden. And the thing I'll say about Georgia is that, to me, this state isn't gone for Biden. A lot of people have written it off and just said that it's going to go to Trump no matter what. I think Biden could definitely still win Georgia. If the election were held tomorrow, I'd pick him to lose it. But in November, I wouldn't be surprised, especially if things change, if Biden were to win Georgia. But let's just talk about it here. So in Georgia right now, what we have is a very, very consistent set of polls. Biden hasn't led in a poll here in like almost 2 years. Let's see. The last Biden poll, I believe, was in 2022. Let's go back. Yeah. So Biden led by 6. Or no, that was against Nikki Haley even. Let's see a Biden versus Trump poll. That's Tim versus DeSantis. DeSantis again. Biden, yeah. DeSantis here, even with DeSantis. Yeah, I can't even begin to find a poll that Biden has led Trump in. And I went back to November 2022. So Trump has led Biden in every one of these polls in Georgia, and they've been remarkably consistent. Once we go back to Georgia, and so. But and that's bad for Biden in the sense that he hasn't gotten any like one singular poll having him ahead. The good news is that he hasn't been down by like 9 or 10 in many of these polls. Like he's down by 9 in the NYT poll that was horrible for Democrats across the board. But more recently, down by 5 in Quinnipiac, down by 1 in Prime. He's down by 3 in the Cook sponsored poll. So he's usually close or within the margin of error. The crosstabs in these polls are very sketchy. The Quinnipiac poll had Trump doing 30% better with black voters than he did in 2020. And a lot of polls in Georgia have shown that recently. Like in 2022, a lot of polls had like Raphael Warnock doing 20 points worse with black voters than he did in 2022 or in 2021. And that didn't happen, obviously. So historically, polls in Georgia have underestimated Democratic support among black voters, and they could be doing it again. So the fact that this is the smallest swing, the fact that most of it comes from, the classic Republicans are actually gaining with black voters thing, to me, that doesn't make me super confident Trump's going to win Georgia. I think he'll win it. I think he'd win it if the election were held tomorrow, but it's definitely still in play for Biden. So let's now go over to the state of Iowa. In 2020, let's go back to June. Trump was up by 2% in Iowa, so he's up by just under 2. So we're going to put that in the tilt column for Trump. And it's not competitive anymore. In Iowa right now, what you'll see is that we don't even have an average, but Trump's up by 15 in the Des Moines Selzer poll, which is a very good poll. I trust them a lot, and Trump's up by 15 there. Signal, he's up by 9. He's up by 12 in Zogby Strategies. He's up by 9 in Emerson. So that's going to average out to a low double-digit win for him. That's kind of what I expect. I actually think these polls right now make a lot of sense in Iowa. And so that is very interesting. But regardless, that's a 10-point swing away from Joe Biden because he was competitive here in the polls in 2020, not so much anymore. We're now going to go over to Michigan. In 2020, Biden held a lead in Michigan that was pretty consistent. Even before COVID, he was still ahead. But let's go to June 8th, 2020. He was up by 8% exactly. And now Michigan's very close right now. I think Biden briefly retook the lead. No, he did. I think that might have been on Poll Tracker USA. But it depends on the average. But he's down by half a point to Trump right now. So we'll put that in the tilt Republican column for 2020. But for 2024. But in 2020, he was up by 8. So that's an 8.5 point swing away from Biden. And this is concerning because in Georgia, you can say that 5 point swing is in part caused by, say, polls overestimating support for Republicans with black voters. In Michigan, the polls are showing swings, obviously, away from Biden with black voters, but Michigan is a state that's significantly wider than Georgia, and the polls are still showing a swing, very consistent with Trump winning the election with white voters. And again, white voters have historically been, white voters historically have actually in the polls overestimated Democratic support. So that's, to me, that's why, in a way, Michigan's more concerning for Biden than Georgia. Doesn't mean that I think Michigan's going to be redder than Georgia, but I do think that the polls here are more concerning for Biden. But let's go to our next state. We're going to go to Minnesota. Biden was up Minnesota all of 2020, but on June 8th, he was up by 5%. That's actually interesting. He was up by less than Michigan. But in 2024, polls are pretty close in Minnesota. Biden's only up by 2.4%. In the latest poll, he's only up by 2 from Survey USA. So that not a great sign for Biden that Minnesota is so close, but it's still better than what Hillary Clinton did here in 2016. She actually almost lost Minnesota in 2016. But let's go to our next state. We're just going to kind of go over to Nebraska, where the 2nd district we saw. I don't know why. There's no way Biden was heading to Nebraska on election day, but yeah, I think there might be a mistake here. But the 2nd district, Biden was up in June, or on June 8th. He was ahead by 7% here. So that was obviously a pretty good sign for him. I actually already marked this here, and I already marked the 2022, or I forgot to, but I already know what it is. He's down by 1% in the polls, so that's an 8-point swing. My apologies for forgetting to fill that out on the other 2024 map, but again, this district, Biden led all of 2020. He's now losing by a little bit. But more importantly, let's go to Nevada, where there's 6 electoral votes at stake. Again, 2020, Biden was ahead for the entire election. On June 8th, 2020, he's up by 5.4, but now it's really not looking good for him in Nevada. He is down by 5%, more than he's down by in Georgia. So right now, Trump +5 in Nevada. But in 2020, again, if you go back, he was up by 3% in the polls in June. Or no, yeah, he was up by 5% actually. So it's actually kind of a mirror image. Biden was up by 5 in June 2020. Now Trump's up by 5. So that's a 10-point swing in Nevada. And this is a state that a lot of people are expecting Trump to win just because the polls have been so bad for Biden there. Let's go to New Hampshire now. In 2020, New Hampshire got a lot better for Biden as the election went on. On June 8th, Biden was up by 6%. So in 2020, we're going to mark that Biden +6. I actually already have that down, but I have it blank here. So we're going to check now. In 2024, as of right now, we don't have an average, but UNH has Biden up by 4. New Hampshire Journal-sponsored poll has them even. Biden's up by 6 in UMass Lowell. We're going to ignore the RFK Jr. internals. And then, yes, that's what we have. So Biden is up by a little bit right now, and that's actually pretty good for him. New Hampshire's a very white state. It is very educated. You have a lot of educated liberal voters there, but it's been swingy. And remember, a lot of people forget this, but New Hampshire did vote red in 2004. So it's been a while since then, and 2004 is reflective of 2024. But New Hampshire will occasionally vote for a Republican presidential candidate. But regardless, in 2024, it does look like Biden is going to maintain his lead there, albeit by a little bit less. So next state, we're going to go to North Carolina. 2020 was kind of back and forth. We actually saw, some ties, some lead changes, but on June 8th, Biden was up by 2 in North Carolina, and in 2024, I think he's actually up by 5 or 6 points right now. He's up by 6.6. Or Trump's up by 6.6 rather. My apologies. So Biden narrowly led at this point in summer 2024. Trump's up by nearly 7 points. So that's another big swing towards Trump in another southern state. So as you can see here, at this point in 2020, even regardless of what happens in Wisconsin, Texas, Ohio, Virginia, or Pennsylvania, or actually Maine 2nd District, Biden had an early lead in as well. But these 5 states, regardless of what happened, Biden would have already won the election. But right now, it looks like a pretty close race. And we're going to see how Trump does in the remainder of these states. So let's go to our next state. We're going to take a look at, I believe, Pennsylvania, or no, Ohio, actually. And Ohio was really back and forth in the polls all of 2020. Didn't end up being that close, but on June 8th, Biden led by 1.4%, so narrow lead for Biden in Ohio. But now, really not good for Democrats at all. Trump's up by 9%. There is a chance Sherrod Brown wins his Senate race. That's what the polls are showing right now, but presidentially, not close at all. Trump up by 9, Biden up by 1. That's another 10-point swing towards Donald Trump in a once important Midwestern state. Not really competitive anymore, though. So let's go to Pennsylvania now. Pennsylvania 2020, Biden led all of the election cycle. On June 8th, 2020, Biden was up by 3.5%. We're going to put that in the lead column. And the polls have been pretty close. Trump's been ahead in most Pennsylvania polls, but they've been reasonably close. He's only up by 1.6% right now. And actually, the list FA actually did have Biden up by 1, so that's a good sign for Biden. But regardless, Trump right now winning Pennsylvania. So as you can see here, he's very close to winning the election. He only needs Texas, Wisconsin, or Virginia to get to 270, whereas at this point, Biden would already be well past 300 electoral votes. So let's go to our next state here. Let's go to Texas. So in Texas, Trump was up for most of the election. Biden did have leads for brief spurts of time. But on election day, I remember Trump did have a narrow lead. But in June, or on June 8th, Trump was up by 1.6%. So that was still a close race, but Trump still had the advantage there. But if you go to 2020, it's actually not close at all right now. Trump's up by 11, and Biden isn't even at 35% of the vote, which is a very bad sign for him. And so at this point, Trump would win the election. Regardless of what happens in Wisconsin or Virginia, Trump would win because he's winning Nevada, he's winning Arizona, he's winning Georgia, he's winning North Carolina, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And those and 5 of those 6 states are states Biden carried in 2020. So the competitive states that Biden flipped blue in 2020 flipped back red for Trump in 2024, if you believe the polls. But still got 2 more states. Let's look at Virginia. In 2020, Biden led all cycle. It wasn't very close in the polls. On June 8th, we saw Biden up by 9.2%. And let's go to our polls right now. We had a tied poll from Fox, 48-48. Biden up by 2 in the Roanoke poll, and then actually tied when they pushed undecided. So that's 2 ties in a row, really. And then the latest poll that we actually saw Biden ahead in was a GOP poll. He's up by 4 here. So, he's up by 3 in some of these other. He's up by 1 for Fabrizio and Lee. So we're going to put this in the narrow lead column for Biden. I'm not sure what the average is, but it's probably about a 2.5 point victory for Biden. And then if you go back to 2020, he's up by 9 in June. So that's another 7-8 point swing towards Trump. And Virginia's a state that shouldn't even be on the map. Virginia shouldn't be competitive, but the polls are showing a close race there. And I actually made a video on that. Go check that out if you haven't already. But I talked about why I don't fully believe it, but it's still interesting. So let's go back to June 8th, 2020. Final state we're looking at here is Wisconsin. On June 8th, 2020, Biden led Wisconsin by just under 6%. Just want to put that in the likely column as well. And then if you go to June 8th, 2024, Wisconsin, I think, is the one swing state Biden. Oh, actually, no. But what I will say is that on other polling averages, Biden does have a lead. He's actually gaining a lot. The latest FAU poll had Biden up by 5. That was from last week, and then Trump's up by 1 in their poll, where I think they don't include third-party candidates. So that would actually help Biden. And then we had the Prime group. They had Biden up by 2. Morning Consult had Trump up by 1 over Biden. So it's kind of been back and forth, but there is movement towards Biden. So that's kind of the silver lining from Wisconsin. But regardless, he's losing there right now. So what do you notice? Well, the first thing you'll notice is that every single competitive state from 2020 is red. And then every state from 2016 that was competitive is red, except for Minnesota and New Hampshire, as well as Virginia to an extent. And so that's really concerning for Joe Biden, obviously, because when you get a map like this in the polls, it's hard to win. You need a significant polling error to win. And in 2020, one of my favorite arguments for the Biden victory was that Trump needed a polling error like 3 to 4 times as large as what he actually ended up getting. And he needed a polling error that was a lot bigger than 2016. And so, do I believe the polls right now? No. I think a lot of what they say doesn't make any sense. I think a lot of the crosstabs don't really check out. But Biden, just looking at it mathematically, the polls are usually wrong, but they're never this wrong because they're all showing the same thing. They're all showing the Trump victory. And that would mean every single one of them has to be wrong for Biden to win. And so, is that possible? Sure. When you look at evidence outside the polls, there's a lot of good arguments for the Biden victory. But when you look at the polls, it gets really bleak. And especially when you compare that to 2020, where Biden led in most of these competitive states, just not good at all. Really not good at all for him. So June 2020, we had a map that was, voters seem to be really leaning towards the Biden presidency. June 2024, it's Donald Trump. So let me know what you want to see next. Let me know what your thoughts are on these polls, if you believe them. If you don't believe them, if you think Biden's on track to win, if you think Trump's on track to win, I want to hear it. And again, as always, like I just said, comment suggestions down below. So thank you for watching, and be sure to like, subscribe. I'll see you all in the next one.